My dear listeners, this is an original sci-fi story I wrote for you. If you'd like to support me, just subscribe to the channel, it really helps the growth. The Vorith cub would not let the human die. The med bay on Neutral Station Epsilon 9 smelled of antiseptic ozone and regret. White lights hummed overhead, too bright for healing, too cold for hope. Lieutenant Daniel Harper lay on the recovery bed, chest wrapped in smart bandages that pulsed faintly with each shallow breath. 47 nights ago he had dragged a half-dead alien child out of a burning drop pod on the edge of the contested zone. 47 nights of forcing nutrient slurry through a cracked mandible tube, of talking to an unconscious predator when no one else would, of telling old Earth stories about dogs and stars to fill the silence. Now the orders had come. The station commander, a stern Skrellian named Vorik, stood at the foot of the bed with arms folded behind his back. His 4 ocular stalks rotated independently, never quite meeting Daniel's eyes. "Lieutenant Harper," Vorik said in the flat monotone of military protocol, "your attachment to the Vorith juvenile has been deemed a security risk and a violation of the Post-Conflict Non-Integration Accord, Article 19. You are to be transferred off-station within the hour. Medical escort will accompany you to the shuttle bay." Daniel tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his ribs where shrapnel still lingered. "The kid's name is Vlash. He's 12 cycles old by their count. He speaks maybe 30 words of galactic standard because I taught him. You're telling me the Accord considers gratitude a security risk?" Vorik's stalks stiffened. "The Vorith are apex hunters. Their juveniles reach combat maturity faster than most species reach puberty. The moment he wakes fully, instinct will override conditioning. He will attempt to claim trophies, starting with whoever is closest. That is biology, not gratitude. He hasn't tried to kill me once in 7 weeks, because he has been comatose or heavily sedated for most of that time." Vorik gestured to the security team waiting in the corridor. 4 armored figures, pulse rifles at low ready. "The juvenile will be placed in stasis containment and transferred to a Vorith reclamation vessel arriving in 72 hours. You will not be present for that handover." Daniel closed his eyes for a second. "You're sending him back to people who left him to die in the wreckage. We are returning him to his own kind. That is the law." 2 medtechs moved in to disconnect monitors. Daniel felt the tug of 4 lines coming free, the sudden lightness of not being tethered. He looked toward the isolation ward visible through the observation window. Inside, under soft blue quarantine light, Vlash lay on a slightly oversized bed. The small Voritha's chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. Greenish fluid still dripped from the corner of one mandible. The armor plates along his forearms, baby scales really were cracked and dull from plasma burns. But even unconscious, his clawed fingers twitched as though reaching for something just out of grasp. Daniel whispered, more to himself than anyone, "I promised him he wouldn't wake up alone." Vorik turned away. "Sentiment has no place in recovery protocols. Escort him." The security team stepped forward. That was when the scream came. Not a human scream. Not even a roar. It was the sound of tearing metal and wet cartilage. A guttural, rising keen that vibrated through every plate and bulkhead on the ward level. Every head snapped toward the isolation ward. Inside the blue-lit room, Vlash was no longer lying down. The juvenile Vorith stood on trembling legs, mandibles wide, secondary jaws extended in full threat display. The medical restraints that had pinned his wrists were shredded. Thin wires and plascuffs dangled like broken jewelry. One clawed hand clutched the 4-stand he had ripped from the wall. Green blood trailed from both forearms where fresh punctures wept. He had torn the lines out himself. His yellow slit-pupil eyes locked through the observation glass straight onto Daniel. Then he moved. Fast. Too fast for something that had been in a coma less than an hour earlier. Vlash charged the reinforced glass. The first impact cracked it in a starburst pattern. The second buckled the frame. Alarms shrieked. Containment fields snapped on, bathing the ward in red emergency light. Security raised weapons. "Don't!" Daniel shouted, shoving himself upright despite the tearing pain in his side. "Lower them. He's not attacking you." The glass gave way on the third strike. Vlash exploded into the corridor in a shower of tempered shards. He landed in a crouch, tail lashing, plasma caster on his left gauntlet whining as it charged from emergency reserves. But he did not fire. Instead, he looked only at Daniel. The security team formed a firing line. Vlash snarled, a sound that made the Skrellian commander flinch, and stepped directly between the rifles and the wounded human. "Stand down," Daniel rasped, forcing himself to his feet. The room tilted. He grabbed the bed rail for balance. "He's protecting me." Vorik's voice cracked with strain. "That is impossible. Juveniles do not protect non-Vorith. Apparently this one does." Vlash took one step backward, pressing his back against Daniel's legs. The contact was warm, almost feverish. The small predator trembled. Not from weakness, Daniel realized, but from rage held barely in check. Then Vlash spoke. His voice was raw, shredded from disuse and damaged throat, but the words were clear, painfully clear. "He took 8 blades for me." Each syllable cost him. Green saliva dripped from his mandibles. "Now, I take all for him." Silence swallowed the corridor. One of the security officers lowered his rifle a fraction. Another followed, then a third. Vorik stared, ocular stalks frozen in place. Daniel rested a shaking hand on the juvenile's quilled head. The spines were soft at the tips, like new feathers. Vlash leaned into the touch, a low rumble vibrating through his chest. Not a growl. Something softer. Something like a purr if predators could purr. Daniel looked at the commander. "You still want to put him in stasis?" Vorik opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the trembling, bloody child standing guard over a crippled human, looked at the security team whose weapons were now pointed at the deck. Finally he spoke, voice quieter than Daniel had ever heard it. "No." He turned to the medtechs. "Prepare a double-occupancy recovery suite. Adjacent beds. Remove the internal partition. And someone get Lieutenant Harper a proper chair before he falls over." As the tension bled out of the corridor, Vlash refused to move from his position until Daniel was safely seated again. Only then did the small Vorith allow himself to be guided, slowly, carefully, back toward the ward. He walked backward the entire way, never taking his eyes off the security team, plasma caster still humming at half-charge. When they reached the new suite, the technicians hesitated only a moment before helping lift Vlash onto the second bed. He refused sedation, refused restraints. But when Daniel reached across the narrow gap between mattresses and took one scaled hand in his own, the juvenile finally relaxed. His mandibles folded closed. The plasma caster powered down with a soft whine. Daniel looked at the child who should have been his enemy. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Vlash's slit pupils met his gaze. "Human said." His voice was steadier now, though still rough. "No one dies alone." Daniel swallowed hard. "Yeah," he managed. "I did say that." The Vorith cub squeezed his hand, claws careful, almost gentle. "Then we keep promise. Together." Outside the observation window, station personnel gathered in small knots, whispering. Word would spread. A Vorith juvenile had defied instinct, defied orders, defied biology itself to stand between rifles and a wounded human. And the human had not flinched. In the long quiet that followed, Daniel began to talk again. Softly, about Earth again, about oceans he had never seen in person, about campfires, about constellations that no longer existed the way he remembered them. Vlash listened, and for the first time since the crash, did not twitch at every sound. Somewhere in the command deck, Commander Vorik opened a secure channel to Fleet Headquarters. The message was brief. Request revision to post-conflict non-integration accord. Case reference. Harper/Vlash. Recommend exception status. Grounds. Observed cross-species pack behavior inconsistent with current behavioral model. He paused, then added one more line. Also requesting extended medical rotation for Lieutenant Harper. Indefinite. He closed the channel. In the recovery suite, A human soldier and a Voroth cub slept side by side, hands still linked across the gap between beds. Neither of them dreamed alone. Days blurred into weeks. Daniel's wounds closed slowly, Vlash's faster. The juvenile refused to let medtechs approach without Daniel present. He ate only when the human ate first, watched every syringe like it might contain poison. But when night cycle came and the lights dimmed, Vlash would curl against Daniel's side, small, warm, armored, and the low rumble would start again. A sound that meant safety in a language older than words. Station gossip became legend. The human who saved a hunter. The hunter who saved the human. Crew from a dozen species stopped by the observation window just to see it. A scarred Terran officer reading aloud from a battered tablet while a Voroth child rested its head on his shoulder, mandibles relaxed, eyes half closed in something approaching trust. One evening a Voroth reclamation officer arrived. Tall, scarred, honor-marked, carrying the weight of an entire clan's shame. He stood outside the suite for a long time before requesting entry. Daniel sat up straighter when the door hissed open. Vlash instantly went rigid, secondary jaws flicking out, a warning hiss building in his throat. The adult Voroth raised both hands, palms open, claws sheathed. "I come to speak, not to take." Daniel nodded once. "Then speak." The reclamation officer looked at the cub. His own mandibles clicked once, respect, sorrow, something deeper. "Your actions dishonored the clan. You were left because you were weak. The weak die. That is our way." Vlash bared teeth. "I live. You live because of him." The adult gestured toward Daniel. A soft-skinned thing with no natural weapons, no honor scars. And yet you stand for him. You bleed for him. You speak his tongue. Vlash's hiss softened. "He speaks mine." The officer studied them both for a long moment. Then he reached to his belt and unclipped a small, blackened trophy, an adult Voroth mandible, polished to a dull shine, strung on braided cord. He placed it on the bed between them. "This was my brother's, your sire. He died believing you dead. Now I see you are not dead, but changed." Vlash stared at the trophy. His claws flexed, then stilled. The officer continued. "The clan will not reclaim you by force. Not after what was witnessed here. But if you choose to return, the shame can be cleansed. In time." Vlash looked up at Daniel. The human said nothing, only waited. The cub reached out, closed his small hand around the mandible trophy, then pushed it gently back toward the adult. "I stay," Vlash said, voice clear now, no hesitation. "He is Pack. Pack does not leave Pack." The reclamation officer exhaled. A long, rattling sound. He bowed once, deeply, then turned to Daniel. "Human, you have given my kin something we lost long ago. A reason to choose mercy over the hunt. If the stars ever align such that our paths cross again, know you have earned a marker. One debt, one life." He left without another word. When the door sealed, Vlash leaned against Daniel once more. The human wrapped an arm around narrow shoulders, careful of still-healing scales. "You could have gone home," Daniel murmured. Vlash clicked mandibles softly. "Home is here." Outside, stars wheeled past the station viewports. Cold, distant, indifferent. Inside the recovery suite, two unlikely survivors shared warmth, stories, and silence. And for the first time in centuries, a Voroth child slept without dreaming of the kill. Because someone had taught him there were things worth more than trophies. Things worth dying for. Things worth living for.